Wait, wait.
It's absolute chess gold. A bold move by the freestyle chess organisers in Las Vegas to invite Hans Niemann, arch nemesis of Magnus Carlsen, to commentate as Magnus Carlsen's playing Levon Aronian in these tie-break games. Levon and Magnus vying to go to the knockout stages of freestyle chess. What we're going to see is that priceless reaction once more at the moment in the game. But first, let's see how we got there. This is the first of two epic tiebreak games. Magnus with white here. He kicks off with this rook pawn, and we're going to whiz through quite fast here. Tell a story, give you the overview, not get too hung up on individual moves. Love these bishops, crossing swords there. And before Levon can get too comfortable, Magnus pushes. We get castles, the ponies develop here, and after takes, the b file opens, and Magnus normally loves it. The ladies leaving the board, few of his fans start bleating, and what we get in the centre is a solid, stable pawn structure for both players. Nothing too much going on here. A big knight box is created right now. We love to see it. The rook hits the open file, and at this moment, apparently, f4 is a stronger move. You could slightly improve the king. The all-powerful engine says don't touch the centre. Magnus does this. Looks really natural. But actually, he's about to get 1-2 counterpunched, because after this and this, Levon now expands with the pawn, and best is actually takes, or you could hop first and the rook moves and then you take, but something like this, not easy to play, because you leave yourself with an isolated queen's pawn. Only black can be marginally better, but should be roughly level. Let's run back, because Magnus glides past, but now a second seahorse is spawned and you've got problems. If you take, pawn takes, you're kicking the knight, and then the centre is collapsing. So you have to live with that, very unpleasant. And how to play, Magnus tries knight d1, rook b4, and he's already in a world of trouble, because there's huge pressure on this backwards d pawn. The rooks could double, the a pawn could run, this knight's soon going to be loose if you ever push a pawn. Yes, it's defended by a rook for now, can't really move to d2, it's just a real bind. So Magnus tries this, but it's horrible. Takes, rook takes, and you simply crash through here using the pin win tactic. You know, if knight takes, you lose a rook, you're in exchange down. So we saw bishop d1 played, but Levon is now a clean pawn ahead, and his technique is superb. Magnus thrashing around here, but it only gets worse. You couldn't live with that knight. We now see a second pawn drop. Levon playing like an absolute beast. He's like one of the top 5 highest rated players of all time. When he turns it on, he turns it on. And you could go bishop b3. He even drops back, drops that pawn, but just consolidates. Soon drops the a pawn for g pawn, but look at that. He's 2 to the good. It's brutal. How about this for a little tactic? It's bishop g4. Love it. The f pawn's going to collapse unless you capture, which Magnus does, but then you exchange pieces. This is how the game proceeded here, excuse me, and after a couple of checks, this white rook spinning around, we see a lovely bathtub set up, and now Magnus exchanges one of the pawns, or Levon does rather, and although it looks like white is kind of binding black in, it's not really, because look at this, rook bounces around, check, blocks, and we see resigns. If you capture, lost endgame. If you take this pawn, there's rook f5. Takes, and this is a lost endgame. You can waste that move and then win the pawn. If you don't take the rook, you know, move away, check or something, well, you move back and then you're about to win the g pawn wherever the rook goes. So Levon Aronian wins a crushing game. Let's jump then to the second, because Magnus now in a must-win position. Levon opens up his queen and bishops. He's playing with white here. Now he takes the center, bishop takes, and Magnus strikes back with pawn e5. The knight develops to support the f4 point. Knight d6, bishop dropping back, takes, and now the queen recaptures. Best for Magnus technically is taking the ladies off, something like this, keeping solid and steady. Rook f1's actually a good move to prepare castling, jump the rooks over and connect, but not played. No queen exchange. Magnus goes bishop c4. Niemann critical of this move, saying, what are you really threatening? You know, if you give me the bishop pair, thank you. King sits on c2, but Levon instead takes, rook takes and hops with the knight. He wants to maintain his structure. Magnus goes for the 000, connects those rooks. This one hits the open file. Bishop d5 played, threatening to take a piece, of course, so takes. Knight takes. Now we see Levon castle, connects those rooks. The knight kicked backwards here, and the drama is on the way. Magnus expands in the center, pawn c3. Now the king tucks into bed, white copies, and after king c6, we now see this knight go on a re-maneuvering journey. The top guys love a pony maneuver. It hits d3, bishop e3, and Levon can just hold solid. He only needs a draw here, remember. Magnus has to mix it up. Now we see the rooks double stack. Pawn a4, h6 goes to g5 town, kick back the bishop, so h4, clamps on that square, tries to clog the toilet. Can Magnus unblock it here? We get takes, knight recaptures, bishop e3, and after this rook invades, suddenly Magnus just gets a little nibble. Pawn covered, now c4 kicks the knight, very explosive, and after the rook saves itself, king d1 gets away from this uncomfortable pin. We see bishop e5, and white's got to be careful. Say you take, really natural reaction, then pawn recaptures, king's marching in, and with this pawn binding, this one coming potentially, more dominant knight, pressure on this pawn, black sitting quite good here. So we didn't see takes. An excellent response by Levon. They've been playing all day. Knight to g2. He finds this clutch move. Magnus now takes, knight recaptures, and although he can kick this one, takes, this is leading towards equality. Because after the excellent knight to h3, going to fork Vegas, the only way to keep an equality is rook f3, pawn drops, this one drops, but how do you eke a win out of this position here, right? Level pawns, really difficult to do it. Something like this could have occurred, but Magnus instead goes rook h2. He drops this pawn but keeps pieces on, but look how his strategy now pays off. This one's running, push 'em baby, as Yasser would say. The rook exchange offered here. Rook f1, Magnus declines. He wants to keep the tension, but look at the pawn running. The king desperately scurries over, blockades the pawn now. Knight f3 and rook b1 is a huge mistake. If Levon finds knight d4, and the reason it's so strong is, say you take, then you're coming into f5 and either e7 or here check. You know, you can drop back or something like this, but then rook g6, you're always kicking the knight away. None of it works here. Let's now run back. Sorry, knight f5 not good immediately, or you crash through here. Best first is king e3, cover the backwards pawn, then knight f5 is coming. So let's run back. We didn't see takes. We didn't see knight d4 first, rather. We saw knight g5. Now it goes for an exchange, which you do not want. Magnus therefore goes knight c5, but there's another winning move. Can you find it? Niemann spotted it in the studio. It's knight f7. And the idea is, if king takes, excuse me, pawn runs through. If you don't take that one, then knight h6 check is coming, pawn running through. It's unstoppable. So we run back here. Now we get this knight coming to h7. Same idea. You can't take, pawn runs. This is coming to f6. So this is played, covering the square. And this is the key difference. You couldn't do that with the knight on f7. Rook f8 on f7. Knight f8 is now played, and it's a drawing move. Magnus could take, he could liquidate. This should be a drawn position. But let's run back. We didn't see that. He keeps the tension. The knight attacked, jumps to d3, and guess what? Magnus's strategy of keeping pieces on the board, they're scrambling on seconds, it pays off because Levon Aronian plays rook takes on h5. Look at the plummet of the bar. There's an absolutely shocking tactic in this position, a winning move. Can you find it? Of course, it's the simple knight f4, check, and we've gone to analysis mode. Board is greyed out. Magnus missed it. He normally finds this stuff in his sleep, right? He's not a tactical wizard, but he doesn't miss this stuff. But he's tired, clearly. Not on his best chess. Emotions running high. Misses the move. Instead, he plays rook e1 check. There's complete freak out in the studio.
No! Oh! No! Wait.
This king goes, and suddenly black is drawing once more. Could even be winning, depending on how Magnus plays, and that's what we now see. Magnus pushing hard, saves the pawn. Now this rook spins around to protect the b pawn, but the c pawn drops. The knight is hit, saves itself. Check is played, the king's driven all the way to the edge of the board, and after a second pawn drops, Levon finds himself a pawn ahead now. They're connected, running in the centre, and black actually has to start checking here to make some kind of drawn position. This should be technically drawn, but we didn't see the check from the rook. We saw this, and it's not the best. Levon now finds 3 great moves in a row. Check. King goes. Now he rotates the knight. This is about to drop. Attacked twice, so advanced, but rook c5, and Carlsen resigns the game. Why? Say you save your knight. It's barely got a good square. Then you can swing behind the pawn. Sure, you can defend it, but now there's different ways to win, of course, but one of the best is checking. This king actually has to stay here. You don't want to walk into discovered checks and lose your knight. And then this one actually stepping in and boxing the knight is best. You start running the pawns. White's completely winning. Magnus had enough. Shocking result there. Niemann absolutely beside himself. And would you look at this for a clip to finish off the video?
And my biggest fans.
Hisham was with you, my friend. You should watch my reaction. I'm like the legend. This is my. You're receiving a bonus in a wire. Check your account too.
It's so funny.
Absolute drama. Personally, I find that slightly awkward to watch, but that's maybe just my British reserve, right? I don't know. It's high quality drama anyway. We love to see it kicking off in Vegas. All to come tomorrow. Do hit subscribe, never miss a recap, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.